Number 1.
Serenity was a resident of the Black Hills Children's Home, BHCH, a treatment center for children with emotional and behavioral problems, in the 24,100 block of Rockerville Road outside of Rapid City, South Dakota, at the time of her disappearance. She was playing in the gym at the home with 3 other children at 10:45 a.m. on February 3, 2019. 2 staff members were tasked with watching the children. One child ran out of the gym but stayed inside the building, and one of the staff members went after that child. While the remaining staffer was watching the other children alone, Serenity ran out of the gym. The remaining staff member didn't follow her but stayed in the gym and called for help since there were still 2 children in the gym and it was against the rules to leave them unsupervised. A person coming onto the BHCH campus at 11 a.m. was the last person known to have seen Serenity. She was walking northbound on South Rockerville Road near the cattle guard in front of the home. She was not wearing a coat in spite of the sub-zero temperatures. She has never been heard from again. Before she went to live in the Black Hills Children's Home, Serenity lived with her adoptive father, Chad Dennard, and stepmother, Cassandra Dennard. They have primary custody of Serenity, and her adoptive mother, Darcy Gentry, has secondary custody. Serenity had stayed in about a dozen foster homes in her early childhood for 2 years after she was removed from her biological parents' care as a toddler. Both of her birth parents are now in prison. In October 2014, after fostering her for several months, Chad and Darcy adopted her. In early 2015, the couple divorced. Chad and Cassandra began raising her in May of that year. They live in Sturgis, South Dakota with Serenity's 3 siblings. Darcy has remarried and lives in Rapid Valley, South Dakota. According to her parents, Serenity suffered trauma as a result of her early childhood experiences. As a result, she would frequently run away from home and had other behavioral issues. Years of outpatient therapy failed to help, and Chad and Cassandra felt it was no longer safe for her to remain at home. In July 2018, they sent her to live at the BHCH, which provides intensive inpatient therapy and schooling for children aged 4 to 14. She was expected to stay for about 14 months, with a predicted discharge date of September 2019. Her parents saw her 4 or 5 times a month during visits and family therapy sessions, and she was allowed to call them twice a week. They believed she was making good progress and described the BHCH staff as caring. Chad visited Serenity at the home the day before she went missing. He said it was a normal visit and she seemed to be doing well. He said she had a history of hiding from the staff and threatening to run away and had once run away while playing outside, but the staff was able to catch her. The policy at the BHCH was that if a child went missing, the staff should notify emergency responders within a reasonable time. After Serenity disappeared, the staff didn't call 911 until 12:26 p.m., by which time an hour and 41 minutes had passed. Instead, they searched the area for her themselves. The facility faced extensive criticism for its handling of Serenity's disappearance. The State Department of Social Services and the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services investigated and found that the BHCH didn't provide the level of supervision Serenity required. They lacked a sufficient emergency preparedness plan. The staff's initial search for Serenity was disorganized, and the 101-minute delay in calling 911 did not constitute a reasonable time. The state gave the home a corrective action plan, stating that a new policy should be adopted, where staff would call 911 immediately after a child disappeared. Later that year, the executive director of the Children's Home Society, which runs the BHCH and provides other education, shelter, adoption and foster care services in South Dakota, retired. Numerous extensive searches of the area, involving police, volunteers and search dogs, have turned up no indication of Serenity's whereabouts. The search was reclassified from a rescue to a recovery effort after several days, as Serenity could not have survived for more than a few nights outside in the extremely cold temperatures. Her case remains unsolved, and she is feared to be dead.
Number 2.
Robin went to watch a softball game in Whitefish, Montana on July 5, 1975. She was walking on West 2nd Street towards a softball field, en route to a residence just 2 houses down from her own. She has never been heard from again. Authorities and Robin's family don't believe she ran away. She wasn't having any problems at home, she left her purse behind, and she wasn't even wearing shoes when she went missing. She kept a regular diary up until she disappeared, it was also left behind. Police read the diary but weren't able to learn any possible reason for her disappearance. Authorities questioned her boyfriend, and he passed a polygraph and isn't considered a suspect in her case. Less than a year after Robin went missing, another teen girl, Nancy Kirkpatrick, disappeared from a town about 10 miles from Whitefish. She has never been found. It's theorized that there's some connection between the two cases, but this hasn't been proven. Since Robin's disappearance, there hasn't been any activity on her social security number. Her parents are both deceased, but she left behind two brothers and a sister who are searching for her. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 3.
Nancy was last seen in Columbia Falls, Montana on April 21, 1976. She babysat for a neighborhood family that day and was last seen walking home afterwards. She never arrived at her residence and has never been heard from again. Nancy's parents were divorced, and she lived with her grandmother at the time of her disappearance. Her loved ones described her as a normal teenager and a good student who was interested in the hippie counterculture. However, she was a chronic runaway and had traveled as far as Seattle, Washington and Los Angeles, California. The police would always find her and bring her home. The day Nancy disappeared, she had just been returned home after running away and spent a day in lockup in Kalispell, Montana, before being released to go back to her grandmother in Columbia Falls. It's possible she ran away again. One of her teachers thought they saw her at a bar in Anchorage, Alaska in May 1983, 7 years later, but this sighting was never confirmed. Less than a year before Nancy went missing, another teen girl, Robin Pettinato, disappeared from a town about 10 miles from Columbia Falls. She has never been found. It's theorized that there's some connection between the two cases, but this hasn't been proven. Both cases remain unsolved.
Number 4.
Craig was last seen at approximately 2 p.m. on June 27, 2004, near the Cambridge Manor apartment complex in Scotia, New York. He had visited a friend in the complex and was afterward seen walking into the woods nearby. He said he was going to his parents' house, which was located in a cul-de-sac on Yorkshire Court, but never arrived there and never returned to the apartment complex. Craig left his car in the complex's parking lot. He has never been heard from again. He wasn't carrying his cellular phone at the time he went missing. Craig's mother reported him missing that evening after he failed to return home to Glenville, New York as expected. She says it is uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning, even though he was having disagreements with his parents around the time of his disappearance. None of his friends have heard from him since his disappearance. His family initially did not publicize his VSDR because they believed Craig might have left to have some time on his own, and they wanted him to be able to work out whatever was bothering him. The friend whom Craig visited the day he vanished says he was upset over a recent breakup with his girlfriend, but he did not indicate he was considering running away or harming himself. He left behind his wallet and $40 in cash in his bedroom. His driver's license had been lost before his disappearance, and he never got another one. His social security number has not been used since his disappearance, indicating that he has not paid taxes, opened a bank account, or applied for a job anywhere in the United States. There are numerous railroad tracks in the area where Craig was last seen, but no indications that he was hit by a train. Craig had just finished his junior year at Scotia Glenville High School at the time of his disappearance. He was a good and popular student there and co-captain of the soccer team, and several colleges were seeking to recruit him for his athletic abilities. He was interested in studying elementary education at college. He has no criminal record, no history of behavioral problems, and no known enemies, but he had been acting secretive prior to his disappearance. Craig did run away once before, in his early teens, but he was only gone for one night. The day of his disappearance, his family found out he'd lost his job at the Price Chopper supermarket, a position he'd held for about 2 months. He had been pretending to work there for weeks after his termination, so his parents wouldn't know he was no longer employed. Authorities don't believe Craig committed suicide or left of his own accord. His loved ones and the police believe he came to harm, but the circumstances surrounding his disappearance are unclear.
Number 5.
Hannah was last seen leaving her boyfriend's apartment in McLeod, California, at approximately 10 p.m. on June 4, 1997. She was walking to her family's residence on Minnesota Avenue near Shasta Avenue, which is 1 or 2 blocks from her boyfriend's home. Hannah never arrived and has not been seen again. Hannah was initially believed to have run away. Her parents recently divorced at the time she vanished, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend. She was upset because he and his family were moving away. Authorities suspected that other factors were involved in her case as the investigation progressed. Hannah had not argued with her family and she had left the majority of her personal belongings at her residence, including her clothing, purse, money, hairbrush, overnight bag, and bass guitar. She was a cheerleader and an aspiring model at the time she vanished. Her family maintains that she would never leave her home voluntarily, as such actions were uncharacteristic of her. Authorities learned that Edward Ray Ed Henline Sr. and his wife may have been the last people to see Hannah before she vanished. The Henlines owned a home on East Minnesota Avenue in McLeod, which was near Hannah's last known location. Another young woman, Karen Nechtel Miro, also vanished from that locale in February 1997, 4 months prior to Hannah's disappearance. Miro once lived in the Henlines' residence, and they were reportedly the last people to see her as well. The Henlines were questioned in both cases, and their home was searched by law enforcement. In December 2012, both Ed Sr. and his son, Ed Henline Jr., were charged with Hannah's murder. Photos of both Henlines are posted with this case summary. Ed Sr. was arrested first, and his son 2 days later. The charges against both suspects were dropped for lack of evidence, however, in May 2013. Authorities stated the murder case against the Henlines could be reinstated if more evidence resurfaces. Hannah's mother stated the police were prejudiced against her and initially did not investigate her daughter's disappearance as thoroughly as they should have. Foul play is suspected in Hannah's case due to the circumstances involved.
Number 6.
China Renee Vidian, age 16, disappeared from Christiana, Tennessee on October 19, 1999. China was a student at Riverdale High School, and she vanished after leaving the Just Imagine salon in Jackson Heights Plaza, where her mother was getting her nails done at the time. There is some confusion as to her mother's understanding of China's plans after leaving the salon. Most reports state that she was going to get gas for her Mazda protege. A few sources add that she planned to stop at the Buy Low on Rutherford Boulevard to pick up her paycheck and/or groceries as well. A stylist who worked at the salon recalls hearing China's mother ask her to pick up some lettuce and bread. A couple sources state that she planned to visit a friend, while most say she would be going home after her errands. What is known is that when her mother arrived home, neither China nor her car were there. She knew right away that something was wrong, as this was completely out of character for China, who is described as a homebody. To me, her concern at finding China gone suggests she hadn't been told that her daughter planned on visiting a friend. Convincing the police that something was wrong proved difficult, at least initially. Believing that she was a runaway, they didn't thoroughly investigate until a significant amount of time had passed. This is in spite of the fact that China had just recently purchased her car and had ordered a class ring. In June 2000, her car was found in an apartment complex in South Nashville, Tennessee, the same complex from which Jennifer Wyant had vanished back in 1980. When the car was found, it appeared to have been there for a long time. It was only finally noticed because the apartment management had issued a notice that all cars needed to be moved for repaving. Once all the cars were gone and only a Mazda Protege remained, they called to have it towed. The vehicle still contained a Buy Low shopping bag with what was left of the groceries inside. Eventually, police announced that they have 2 persons of interest in China's disappearance. The 2 men, identified only as Chris and TJ, were managers at the Buy Low store where China worked. According to one source, China was seen at their home after she'd been to the grocery store. It's not clear whether anyone knew that she intended to visit Chris or TJ that day. Perhaps that was what the earlier reports of her planning to visit a friend were referring to. One article from Channel 2 vaguely refers to her plans to visit them, stating she had gotten some groceries and she was on her way to go back and see the 2 people at the apartment, Chris and TJ. And nobody's seen or heard from her since. Prior to the portion I just quoted, there had been no mention of Chris and TJ or of an apartment in that article, so it's not really clear what the apartment means. China's home? Chris and TJ's home? If they mean Chris and TJ's, then back to the apartment doesn't make sense. The apartment complex where the car was found? That's the only apartment I've ever seen mentioned in this case, but again, back to the apartment doesn't fit. And it was a good hour away from her home. In any case, China's family and law enforcement now believe China met with foul play and that Chris and TJ are responsible. Police have received information that TJ has told others about the crime. In September 2015, investigators went to Goose Creek, South Carolina to search for evidence and hang flyers. That is where TJ lived at the time of the search and was employed in a large James Island box store. He has not been cooperative and law enforcement has honed in on him, painting China's name on a boat with the hashtag TJ and using the same hashtag on their Twitter feed. Chris lives in Alabama. Since the announcement of the two suspects, there have been multiple news articles indicating that an arrest was imminent, but as of this writing, it appears no arrests have been made. Prior to her disappearance, China had said to her mother, "Don't be sad if I died." Her mother inquired as to what she meant, but China had no explanation. China's family and friends continue to hold vigils and hope someone will come forward with information that will bring Het home. She has been declared legally deceased. China loved animals and children and was said to be a good employee and student, with no reason to leave on her own.
Number 7.
Chantel was last seen in Dayton, Nevada on November 14, 1988. She got in an argument with her mother and left their apartment on Dayton Valley Road at 7:30 a.m. Her mother reported her as a missing person shortly afterwards. She stated her daughter had made friends she didn't approve of. There were 2 reported sightings of Chantel in the month after she went missing, but police believe both sightings were probably misidentifications. She has never been heard from again. Authorities reopened her case after receiving an inquiry from one of her relatives in 1999. There has not been any activity on her social security number, and investigators were unable to locate Chantel through an extensive driver's license search. Chantel had moved to Dayton from Bishop, California about 2 weeks before her disappearance. Some witnesses reported seeing Chantel at a Dayton street dance 2 days after she was reported missing. It's possible she met with foul play at the dance. She may have been seeing a boy at the time of her disappearance. If she was, investigators have never identified him. Rumors that drugs were involved in her case have not been substantiated. Chantel's father has been ruled out as a suspect in her case. Her mother now lives in Redding, California. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 8.
Erica was last seen between 9 o'clock and 10 p.m. at the Video N Tan in Brooksville, Kentucky on October 21, 1997. She was socializing with her friends that night. She has never been heard from again. Erica's black 4-door 1988 Pontiac Bonneville SSE was discovered unlocked and abandoned off of Franck Road between bales of hay in a field off Franck's Lane the day after her disappearance. The vehicle was located approximately 1 mile from the Video N Tan. Her purse, wallet, checkbook and money were inside the car, but there was no sign of her at the scene. Erica's car keys were missing for some time afterwards, but were later discovered across the road under some leaves. There was no sign of Erica near the car, nor were there any signs of foul play. A photo of the vehicle is posted with this case summary. A man who was questioned about Erica's disappearance later shot his wife to death before committing suicide. Authorities say the individual was ruled out as a suspect in Erica's case before he died. He had an alibi for the night of her disappearance. Another suspect, 20-year-old Shane M. Simcox, an acquaintance of Erica's, was with Erica the night she vanished and may have been the last person to see her. He stated she gave him a ride to his house, dropping him off at 9 p.m. Simcox had previously been expelled from Bracken County High School for threatening a teacher and her daughter. He has a criminal record for burglary, and he refused to take a lie detector test in connection with Erica's case, but he has maintained his innocence in her disappearance, and no convincing evidence has been found against him. He is, however, considered a person of interest in Erica's disappearance. Erica was a resident of Germantown, Kentucky, 50 miles south of Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1997. She was a senior at Bracken County High School in 1997 and worked part-time at Carota's Pizza in Augusta. Shortly before she went missing, she requested more hours at her job. She planned to enroll in Northern Kentucky University after graduation and study accounting. Although she'd started hanging out with a rough crowd and she had argued with her best friend prior to her disappearance, authorities do not believe Erica left of her own accord. She has no history of running away, she was a good student with a steady boyfriend and no indications of trouble in her life, and she didn't tell her friends of any travel plans. There are few leads in Erica's case. Her parents have both died in the years since her disappearance. Due to lack evidence as to her fate, her disappearance is being investigated as a missing person rather than a crime.